Welcome back to the Reier on YouTube channel, where it is time once again for Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the number one league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. Travis Reier, joined by my great friend and longtime college football analyst, Mr. Brent Beaird. Most recently, Brent has displayed his immense talents for First Coast News down in Jacksonville, Florida. Brent also, of course, a voter for the most prestigious individual honor in college football, the Heisman Trophy. Brent, we skipped a week last week. We had Reier Palooza, that annual gathering down in kind of Steve Spurrier stomping grounds down there in Crescent Beach. So we've done that for probably even longer than the head ball coach has. We've been doing that down there for about 45 years now. And we made it another year. Pops, I know a lot of people like to know about Pops.
Yes, they do.
The behavior was borderline exemplary.
What about that?
We've moved into this next era with Pops where there's not as much Jack Daniels involved.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how that seems to have sort of harnessed him, a little bit more. But a great week, but still great to catch up with you. And hey, you know what? It's July 1st, and we're live on a Tuesday night, July the 1st. And so I got to ask you, did your revenue sharing check? Did it hit today? Because we know we're getting that underway today. Historic in a lot of ways, right?
It used to be where it come in the mail. That's not happening anymore.
No.
Trav, do you see where some of the conferences are using PayPal to get it done?
I was going to say, if I was one of these athletes, I would want the actual check. To have a copy of it or a canceled version of it or something. But, everything's probably Cash App or Venmo or, we used to think direct deposit was sort of, revolutionary or trend setting and all that. It came and went pretty quick. But now you got all these other methods of transferring funds, but it is still a big day in the landscape of college athletics, one that I'm not sure I thought I'd ever see.
No, absolutely not. And we still don't know, Trav, what we're all dealing with here. I mean, there are just still so many questions that have to be answered with this, that it's frankly just unbelievable. All in all, but I mean, and there'll be ramifications of things to go on. Look, we knew this would happen. The issue we're dealing with, it's something that every time we do a podcast, we're dealing with because it hasn't been dealt with yet, or just some the broader issues of what format are we going to use for the playoffs. How many portals, National Signing Day, and also it's going to be moved. It's just a matter of where, OTAs and things like that. And Travis, to me, the disturbing thing is, for some unknown reason, the commissioners don't meet face to face again until September the 24th. I mean, what in the world? I know they'll do some Zoom, but Trav, when you've got issues like this that shape your sport, like some people have said, Mike Slive, former SEC commissioner, would have put him in a room and said, boys, I'm locking the door until you come to some consensus. You're not going home.
Yeah, we're going to have a meeting that essentially falls in about the fourth week of the season when we've got games like Georgia and Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we should be talking about in late September. And so, hey, nothing does motivational sort of enthusiasm for folks like deadlines. Yeah. And so you just get the sense right now that's essentially what this is going to require at some point, where the deadline is going to be such where we get these entities on the same page. And I know, based on your notes this week, doesn't sound like the SEC and the Big Ten are on the same page, not even in terms of how many teams in the playoff, let alone a format.
Well, and a couple things to your point would be, as far as deadlines, the deadline for the playoff, 12, 14, or 16, is December the 1st. And frankly, if the SEC wants to go to 9, they really need to get that done, Travis, before the season begins.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but your point real quick, the SEC and the Big Ten, that was kind of in lockstep with this. The Big Ten prefers the 4-4-2-2-1-3, which is 4 automatic qualifiers for
That
a
sounds
year.
like a soccer alignment,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
soccer
really.
tactic.
Yeah,
That
or
4-4-1-3 or
yeah,
yeah.
or the 4-4, meaning 4 guarantee spots, and then the SEC more likes the 5-11, which is
And the
11.
coaches specifically in the SEC like the
Yes,
5-11. Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But Trav, get this now. My understanding is a lot of the ADs, they like the 4-4.
And they liked it at SEC spring meetings, I
They
think, is
did.
where
They did.
the ADs and the coaches and within
Yes.
the SEC weren't
Yes.
aligned on
Yeah.
a format. So yeah, we'll see how this all plays out. But look, we do know a couple of things. We do know it is July. We do know
Mm-hmm.
that. And that means that we've got media days on the
Yes.
very immediate
Mm-hmm.
horizon. And I want to go ahead and give a dunce cap to a particular conference as we get going on this
Really,
Tuesday night.
really.
The Big 12, Brent, do I understand this correctly? The
Yes.
Big 12 has decided to do away with preseason media voting.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I have no idea what they think is the wisdom behind this, because every conference, whether we like it or not, does it. I mean, does it mount anything? Does it count? Of course it doesn't. But if you're the Big 12, Trav, don't you want some publicity?
Wouldn't you like some people talking about your league right now when you've got the 10,000-pound gorillas in the form of the SEC and the Big
Yeah,
Ten that
yeah.
everyone wants to talk about?
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. Typically, it doesn't amount to much, but for a day or two, it's something that can be a conversation starter
Sure.
relative to your conference and a
Yes.
conference that could absolutely use it. So, is it a mountain or a molehill? It's more of a molehill, but it's still pretty much idiotic, in my
Yeah.
opinion, to
Yeah.
do away.
Agreed.
If you're the SEC or the Big Ten, you
Mm-hmm.
may be at a place where you can say, you know what, we're just not even. And I would say the same thing about the SEC and the Big Ten
Yeah.
if they
Oh
did
yeah.
away with it. Maybe not to the
Yeah.
extent of the Big 12 or the ACC,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, just doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, no, it really doesn't. And by the way, they are, speaking of media days, the Big 12 actually is the first one, July 8th through 9th. So that will be next week. And then the SEC. And then now, why the ACC does this is beyond me. The Big Ten's media days are July 22nd through the 24th. Well, guess when the ACC meeting days are? July 22nd through 24th. And you remember for years, the ACC overlapped the SEC in their media days, and why they would do that, it was not clear either.
Nobody puts the ACC in a corner, pal. I'm having a sort of
Oh,
Patrick Swayze
yeah,
flashback
yeah,
from the
yeah.
80s and 90s, I guess, there. But yeah, interesting scheduling, to say the least. So some really, really big milestones on, again, that immediate horizon. And then really, when you think about it, especially with the Big Ten and the ACC being as late as they are, you're going to be going right into fall camp.
Sure you are. Oh, yeah, and listen, and you know this well, having talked to folks over the last few days. This week is basically an off week.
Yeah.
They come back next week, and that's what I've learned from you over the years.
Yeah.
They come back after the 4th of July and travel. They're basically on campus until the season ends.
Yeah. I mean, your teams, it used to be that you really used 2 days as much as anything to get your team in shape,
Yeah,
right?
right,
You'd come
right.
back in
Yes.
late July, early August, and
Mhm.
big part of that with 2 and maybe sometimes 3 a days.
Yeah.
Back in the old days with college football, you used it to get yourself in condition, even to
Hmm.
play, to go through a season. Not anymore. I think teams when they come back, really, after the 4th of July, after a month together in the month of June for off-season conditioning and workouts, and then probably player-led stuff. They're just about ready to go when they get back after that holiday on the 4th. And Brent, something else we want to get into tonight. It's kind of a continuation of what we did the last time we got together here on Second Helping. We're buying or selling some SEC teams here in the months of June and July, as potential college football playoff contenders. We won't say necessarily a national championship contender for this school and this program we're going to talk about tonight, but where the college football playoff is concerned, I think Florida is a very interesting team.
It is.
I think more so than certainly any of the previous 3 seasons under Billy Napier, who is a perfectly average, or I guess by Florida standards, subpar at 19 and 19 going into his 4th season. That roster, though, looks a lot more like a team that could challenge for the college football playoff. And, people hear that and they go, why are they really talking about Florida? Well, it's actually with the 12-team playoff. If you're a top 4 team in a league, you are a contender, a big-time contender for a spot. Whereas we're not even talking about Florida as a potential SEC champion. We're not talking about Florida as a potential top 2 team, but as a top 4 team, this team led by DJ Lagway and some really nice returning pieces on the offensive side of the ball, especially on that offensive line, especially in that backfield to go along with Lagway, especially with some of the additions on the outside offensively. You could look at this team kind of like an Ole Miss last year, because at the end of the day, we talked about this before the show. 9-3 is kind of that number you need to try to hit to at least be relevant to the college football playoff discussion. That was South Carolina last year. That was Ole Miss last year. That was Alabama last year. Now, went 0 for 3, but they went into that selection day, very much in the mix for one of those final spots.
Well, and one thing the commissioners are really trying hard to do to go along with what you're saying is they want this committee to take seriously, or more seriously than they did last year, strength of schedule.
Yeah.
So if you're the committee and look with Florida, Trav, with Florida's schedule, if you're 9-3, I think they've got an argument to be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Even against a 10-2 team that has a poor strength of schedule. And now again, we don't know what the committee is going to do. They didn't take all that seriously last year, but this year the commissioner is really putting some pressure on them for that to happen.
Yeah, they should, because as we'll talk about coming up here in a little bit with the Florida Gators, the schedule flipped, which will benefit Florida in a lot of ways. But when you look at it from top to bottom,
really,
it feels like a wash with what awaits Billy Napier's team coming up this season. We'll start with the roster. We'll start with some projections across the football team for the Florida Gators. And it starts at quarterback with DJ Lagway. We understand that. I think you could argue, though, that this quarterback room in general is probably a good bit weaker than it was going into 2024 because you had Graham Mertz and a newcomer, a talented newcomer in DJ Lagway. More so than even a year ago, there is a premium on the starter at quarterback for Florida staying healthy, because once you get beyond DJ Lagway, and we understand he had the injury issues last season, and also going into the offseason, the spring, there was a lot of talk about the shoulder, those type of things. Was that more, you think, reason for concern legitimately, or do you think that was more precautionary?
I think it was maybe a little bit of both. I mean, we've seen him throw a little bit, but probably nothing beyond 15 yards or something like that. So we really don't know where the shoulder is. And look, to your point too, I mean, he's a dual threat. His strength is also in his legs. But Trav, do you dare have a situation to where he ends up aggravating that hamstring early in September, and particularly particularly when you've got the schedule that they do in September with LSU and Miami on there. I mean, the healthier he's going to be, the better they're going to be.
And this next group we're going to talk about, in conjunction with the offensive line we're going to talk about, should make it more of a situation that if Napier, Callaway, Sale, you decide, look, we're going to pick our spots.
Yeah.
We're going to be very selective with DJ Lagway as a designed runner. Now, when things break down and he has to play football,
Sure.
That's another thing. But in terms of dialing him up in the run game, when you've got Jaden Ball back at the running back position,
absolutely.
when you've got Jacoby Jackson, really a lot of nice depth even beyond those two. But boy, Jaden Ball a year ago, it was like watching, I thought it was sort of a hybrid of like Todd Gurley meets TJ Yeldon. I couldn't have been more impressed with Jaden Ball. Jacoby Jackson, a very good back in his own right. So again, there shouldn't be a huge need to dial DJ Lagway up more than a couple of times a game.
No, and look, and to go along with these running backs, this is an excellent group of wide receivers too. I mean, both the Wilson kids are. I mean, they've had good. Now I know spring game doesn't make that much difference, but these guys really showed out in the spring game. I mean, until he really is ready to go. I mean, at this point, I'm not going to say Lagway needs to be a game manager. That's not what I'm getting at. But the reality is, Trev, all you got to do with this offense behind that one of the best offensive lines in the league, just spread the ball around and let these guys do what they can do.
Yeah, I don't know if Florida's first three at wide receiver are going to be at a level of, say, like Alabama's going into the season with Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, Elijah Horton, those type of guys. But you're right. Trey Wilson, experienced playmaker, has had some injury issues. Dallas Wilson comes in as a very heralded addition. Burnell Brown, you can kind of get to him as well as a playmaker. Aiden Mizell has some starting experience. J. Michael Sturdivant.
And they love him.
It's a very attractive group. And if they run the football like you think they're going to be able to run it, Lagway has shown you he can attack the deep areas of the football field. And with these type of guys on the outside, if teams are really, really put in a position of having to commit extra people to the run game, should be an explosive passing offense for the Gators.
Yeah, and if the line can stay healthy, I think they can be really good. Slaughter is as good as anybody in the league at center. I'm not saying he'll be the number one center in the league and first team, but he'll certainly be close to that. And Austin Barber, Trev, I saw today, they think Barber may be a top 15 pick in the draft.
Yeah. Excellent left tackle. Damian George Jr. has been in the SEC for what seems like 25 years. Started out at Alabama, since moved on to Florida. He is what he is. He's more of a mauler at the one guard spot. Previously, earlier in his career, he was tried at tackle. I think he's in the perfect spot. But for the five starters from the end of the 2024 season, it's a good looking group, boy, up front for the Florida Gators. And it kind of, again, underscores the potential of this Florida offense when you talk about balance and what it should be able to do between running the football and then attacking via the explosive play when it does go to the air. What about the defensive side of the ball? Up front defensively, I don't know how you don't like Tyreek Sapp coming back, George Gums coming back.
Caleb Banks
at the defensive tackle position. You've got some talented guys also on the edge, young guy like LJ McCray, heavily coveted recruit from a couple of cycles ago. So I guess maybe depth at tackle, who goes along with Caleb Banks. DeAndre Robinson moved on in the offseason to North Carolina. The Gators did work the transfer portal to try to supplement that situation with the interior defensive line. But boy, you return a lot of playmaking ability in those
Really
couple of
do.
three guys we talked about.
And listen, right behind them, they love Pup Howard.
Yeah, linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a local kid too. But he was at South Carolina,
Yep.
played there a little bit. So I think he's pretty impressive. They like Sharif Denson at that star, and Devin Moore and Jordan Castell. I mean, if those kids are healthy, look, this is not the '85 Bears, but this could be a very aggressive defense that could help them throughout the season.
Yeah, I think that if you have a concern about this Florida football team, really, it's still as much improvement as we saw. As much as anything, it felt like they got kind of the executive structure of that
Yes.
defense
Yes.
figured out last season as the season wore on, and the Gators seemed to play better and better on that side of the football against some really good competition. But you've had some injuries in the secondary too. I'm with you on Pup Howard, the Jacksonville native, started his career at South Carolina. I think he can be a really, really good player. Ty Jackson coming in as the heralded guy from the
Mm-hmm.
recruiting ranks. So, but still, once I get beyond sort of that defensive front, there's still a lot I want to see from kind of that back
Yeah.
seven for the Florida defense, Brent.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And listen, to me, their biggest weakness is special teams.
Yeah. Has
I,
been.
I just look. And Trap. It's not the individual kickers and return
Specialists.
guys.
Yeah.
It's just this
The
inability.
coordination. Yeah.
Yes.
Or lack
Yes.
thereof.
Yeah. I mean, they've got this mat that everybody was standing on. But people rip that up and down all the way.
Florida's special teams kind of reminds me of how you go to the grocery store these days.
Yeah.
And instead of going through a checkout line with a checkout
Yes.
clerk who
Yes.
coordinates the checkout, right?
Yes.
You go through the kiosk. It's like
Right.
Florida.
Oh yeah.
Florida's trying to run special teams with a special teams kiosk.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
walk up to this mat, and then we'll figure it out from the mat. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look, though, I'll say this in defense of Billy Napier. He's not the only one these days. I mean, you've got other places where essentially they brought in a special teams analyst.
Yeah.
And with
Yeah.
analysts
Right.
now essentially able to coach,
Mm-hmm.
that's the route they've taken. But
Yeah.
the problem is if you do that and you have some just monumentous catastrophic
Yes.
mistakes,
Yes. Right.
the fan base doesn't forget real good.
No. No.
How
Really
you go
don't.
about it. And I think that's probably been Florida under Billy Napier as much as anything.
Yeah, but those things are fixable. But the
Yeah.
problem is, it hasn't been fixed.
Right.
That's the thing that frustrates Gator fans. And Trev, you remember games like they had about they had about 20 guys on the field, and they get a penalty.
Yeah.
And they had a makeable field goal, and the 5-yard penalty makes it now. The field goal goes to the right or the left, whichever it did. And I mean, look, those are things that at some point people harp on, and it just has to be cleaned up.
It does. It does. No argument here. So again, when you look at this Florida football team from a personnel perspective, I think it's plausible to think the Gators could be in the conversation again from a
Mhm.
people perspective. Now you're going to
Yes.
need some good
Yes.
injury luck,
Oh, yeah.
especially with Lagway and even with a couple of three guys, maybe even more so on the defensive side than even the
Right.
offensive side, where you probably have more questions. But what about Billy Napier in all this too? Because he takes on a lot. And he's
Mhm.
another area where I've heard a lot of Florida fans rumble in the last couple of 3 years is they're not enamored with Billy
Yeah.
Napier, the offensive brain trust or the
Mhm.
offensive play caller and those type of things. Now that sort of evened out as last season wore on. It's
Yeah.
amazing how talented quarterbacks can kind of
No question.
do that. But is that a big concern for you when we talk about Florida in these terms? Or are you still kind of waiting to see with Billy Napier and really that staff in general, because they went through last season with what felt like a tumultuous situation.
Yeah, they did.
On the defensive side of the ball.
No question.
That they were real time in it, trying to work through during the season.
Yeah. Well, the thing that saved them was November. And I mean, beating LSU and Ole Miss, and then you beat Florida State, and then you win a bowl game. Now obviously to Tulane, you and I and a few guys from down the street could have played started for Tulane that night, but still
quarterbackless Tulane too. I think it was.
But and to go along with this, Trav, the thing that really gets me at LSU, at Miami, Texas, and at A&M. Now they've got a week off before they play Texas. Trav, would they, if they could, will they sign a contract right now in that 4-game span for 2 and 2?
I would think so. We're going to pull the schedule up right now and really kind of take a look at it. You open things up with Long Island, so you're going to be good there. It's a 7 p.m. kickoff on August the 30th. South Florida, you should be okay. But then you go, like you said, at LSU. That's interesting because that's about in a spot where traditionally we've seen Tennessee. At that point in the season.
Yes.
But it's going to be on the road in Baton Rouge, and that is, by the way, Saturday night in Death Valley. That's going to be a 7:30 kickoff on ABC. Then you're looking at Miami the very next weekend on the road. Now, that's a road game, but I think it's going to be kind of the 180 of going to Baton Rouge because there'll be plenty of Gators in Miami Gardens.
There will be
on September the 20th. And you do get a bye week, but then you get Arch Manning, the Texas Longhorns on Saturday, October the 4th. So to your point, LIU, South Florida, LSU, Miami on the road, Texas, and Gainesville. And, we can talk about those first 5, but you can extend it to on the road at LSU, at Texas A&M. Week after you get Texas and Gainesville. For your first 6,
Now, what do you think about that Miami game? Now, look, I know that LSU is a conference game and how important that is. But Trev, after just being destroyed in the swamp by Miami last year, I mean that Miami game on the road, I think has, from recruiting and the whole 9 yards, has a lot of significance for this Gator team.
Yeah, I think Florida finally gets Carson back, is what I think. I think I like the Gators in that game at Miami. I kind of like Florida at 4-0, even on the road in Baton Rouge, because I still remember how Florida got after Garrett Nussmeier in Gainesville last season in November, like you talked about. And I think they might be able to do it again with, a couple of 3 of those guys they're going to bring back up front on the defensive side. So 3-1, 4-0, after your first 4, and then Texas coming to town. I mean, you could be talking about Texas is one of the biggest games in the swamp.
Oh, yeah. No question.
In the last 40, 50 years, and that's including the Spurrier era, the Urban Meyer era. Yeah. That could be huge.
Oh, yeah. And a Texas team that at that point, Travis, probably very well could be number 1 in the nation coming in.
The Florida's had good luck against Mannings, though.
They have,
in Gainesville. If you go back to Peyton, not sure about Eli. I think Jevin Sneed was the Ole Miss quarterback who got the Gators, and that was 2008. I believe, down there in Gainesville with Houston Nutt on the sideline.
That's right.
Right forever.
Yeah. Now, real quick, before you scroll much, and I know it doesn't look like much, but after Long Island, they've got South Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, what they don't need is to come back and slop through and win.
No.
And win 24-13 or something like that. So, I mean, a win's a win, but good and well, I know this only matters maybe for one play. I mean, frankly, Trav, South Florida's practicing their whole summer for that game.
Yeah, I would think so. And this again is where, you know, a guy like Billy Napier can kind of assert himself as being the guy as much as
Yeah,
anything.
yeah,
It's not the LSUs and the Miamis and the Texases sometimes that you worry about with certain teams that are coached by certain individuals. It's like you said, it can be those South Florida games that can be problematic. South Florida has given teams trouble in the SEC the
oh
last few
yeah,
years. Just ask Alabama about
yes,
that. The last couple of times that the Crimson Tide has seen the Bulls on the gridiron. So we do get into October, and we talked about it before. That's really kind of the separation month.
mm-hmm.
This is
No
where you
doubt.
really find out really about your roster too, because you start to get through the gauntlet of September into October. And as we said, not much in the way of breaks. Now, homecoming on October the 18th, you've said this on previous shows, Mississippi State gonna probably
Yeah,
lead the nation in homecoming games
probably.
when you include the Bullies' own homecoming game.
Yes,
So you feel good
yes.
about that. But really, man,
Mhm.
you look at October, even if you want to include Georgia in that on November 1st, Texas A&M, Georgia, but you do get the bye week after Mississippi State. You get through Texas A&M kind of in one piece,
Yes,
you
yes.
know, at 5-2 or even 6-1, and then you get Mississippi State, then a bye week, then Georgia.
Hmm.
That's when the discussion about legitimacy in the college
Yes.
football playoff, I think, would really start to ramp up.
Oh yeah, yeah. And may we say that this Georgia game is really going to get interesting, Trav, when that rivalry goes to Atlanta and Tampa very,
Yeah.
very soon.
Yeah, it does. It does. Stadium work in Duval, going to put that series in neutral sites for a couple of seasons. Now, last time we had that scenario, we actually had home and home. I mean, we
Yeah,
had
we
a
did.
game in Gainesville, and then the head ball coach very
Yeah.
unceremoniously dropped
Yes.
55 or so
Yes,
on the
he did.
Dogs at Sanford Stadium. He
Right.
wasn't a very gracious guest, I
No.
didn't think, in doing that. See, he seemed to enjoy that, Brent, the
Yeah.
head ball coach,
Yeah,
when he did
yeah, I
that.
think he enjoyed that just about as much as he enjoyed his comment about Arch Manning recently, Trav.
Oh, wow. Got after Arch a little bit. Got after Texas a little bit, probably
Yeah,
more than
yeah,
Arch. So then you go Georgia in Jacksonville. Kentucky had become a real nemesis for
yes,
Florida
they
under
really
Mark
did.
Stoops. You don't really look at that game the same way
Mhm.
after the last couple of years up in the Bluegrass. So going to Lexington in November can be dicey
Yes,
because
it
weather
can.
can start to play a role into that. But
Mhm. Mhm.
again, if Florida's able to keep things together from a health perspective and intangibly, that should be another good spot for this team. And then what could be kind of an elimination
Absolutely.
sort of game on November the 15th in Oxford, when you talk about Ole Miss in
Mhm.
Florida. And, Ole Miss certainly probably still feeling the effects of that loss in
Yeah,
Gainesville
no doubt.
last November.
Oh yeah. Lane said it took him a while to get over that
Yeah.
loss, Travis.
Yeah.
So, but look, I agree with that totally. That people may miss this, but that Florida Ole Miss game is going to have immeasurable amount to do with possibly with the playoffs.
It
So,
very well might. Still a lot of excitement in
mhm,
Oxford, even with the departure
mhm.
of some very key individuals, including Jackson Dart. Then just another kind of quirky deal from a scheduling perspective, seeing Tennessee
Really,
at on November the 22nd for Florida, because we
yeah.
were so accustomed to for years Tennessee, Florida being one of those September, what I
Mhm.
called gateway games.
Yes,
Somewhere around
yes,
that third Saturday in September, you would have, now this is back in the day,
yeah.
but you'd have the Tennessee Florida matchup. And then maybe in the West, back when we had divisions, Alabama, Arkansas was always
Mhm.
that kind of
Yeah,
game
right,
in
right.
September. But the Vols, who I believe the last time I remember the Vols being this late in the regular season for
Mhm.
Florida, 2001, because I think well, that was 9/11, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
the Tennessee Florida game was pushed back to December the 1st.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
want to say that game, if it I want to say that was maybe Steve Spurrier's last regular season game, home game in
Yeah.
Florida,
Tribute.
because he
Oh, yeah.
left after that season. But it's
Mhm.
just kind of interesting to see Tennessee on November the 22nd on this schedule. And again, another situation where, if Florida can get to November with those college football playoff hopes
Absolutely.
intact,
Oh, yeah.
this looks like a very doable situation at home against a Tennessee team who knows what that quarterback situation is going to end up looking
Yeah.
like.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. By the way, in that Tennessee Florida game from years ago, Trav, if I remember right, Tennessee ran for about 300 yards in that game. Florida could, even with that, as good as that defense, could not stop them.
I think that
Now,
was Casey Clausen still back then, maybe at quarterback for
yeah,
Tennessee.
yeah. Now, let me throw this scenario at you. What would beating Miami, Tennessee, and Florida State, Trav, do for Napier's future?
He'd be in good shape. Yeah,
Yeah, he would be, wouldn't
he
he?
would be in good shape. I think
Yes.
Billy would be just fine in that
Mhm.
scenario. So, Florida State, as we alluded to, going to cap the regular season for the Gators at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. Yeah, that would be pretty much euphoria, especially if it culminated with, say, 9, 10 wins
Yeah.
in the
No,
regular season
absolutely.
with this schedule.
Yes.
I think that
Yes.
would be. I don't know if I don't know if 9-3 gets Florida into the college football playoff if it plays out that way. But as an outsider, I'd say 8-4, 9-3. If you're a Florida
Mhm.
fan,
Yeah.
I understand the expectations at Florida are higher than they are a lot of places. But if
Yeah.
you're even having a shred of a realistic viewpoint of this situation, you win 8 or 9 in the regular season with this schedule. There's going to be a case to be made that an 8-win Florida team that doesn't get into the playoff
Mhm.
might be better than 2 or 3 teams that do
Yeah.
get into the playoff. Maybe
Easily.
even a 7-win Florida team in
Yeah.
that scenario.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So it's a fascinating schedule, to say the least. But I'm with you. That first month of the season is crucial for them.
It is. Need to get off to 4-1 if you can, but boy, when you've got LSU, Miami, and Texas 3 straight, even with that bye week separating
Yeah.
Miami and in Texas, that's a lot of bear to jump on there. Hey, we got
Yeah.
some viewers checking in live here with us, Brent. We want to say hello to Little Joe C.
Hello,
Says
little
hello
Joe.
on this Tuesday evening. And also Brian Kane checking in says, every time I can catch the conversation, I enjoy a second, third, and fourth helping.
Oh,
Keep up
like
the good
that.
cooking, gentlemen. We appreciate that, Brian, as well. So I think maybe, how do you see this? Are you ready to go out on that limb with Florida and say, yeah, I think Florida Gators are a college football playoff team, or you need to see a little bit more? Maybe you need to just see even DJ Lagway
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
August to feel,
Agree.
DJ Lagway is kind of like CJ Stroud of the Houston
Yeah.
Texans, because all off
Yes.
season, to use an analogy with quarterbacks, there's been talk about CJ Stroud and is his shoulder good? Is he good? Is there reason for concern? I think that's kind of been the situation with
Mhm.
Lagway, and I don't know if anyone's totally going to feel great about it until we get into August.
Yeah, agreed. And look, I still say, not, I don't know from last year if 9-3 is going to get them in the playoffs, but I think that might be realistic for them if Lagway's healthy. But again, I say a lot of this is up to this committee and what they think. Would they put a 9-3 in over a 10-2 that has the 70th rated schedule in the nation type thing?
Yeah,
They didn't last year. What would they change their mind this year?
yeah. Well, the thing that Florida can't afford to do, and even though this is like games at Kentucky, you got to win that game. You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
you can
absolutely.
erase
Yes,
a lot of good
yeah,
work
yes,
if you don't take care of business in games in which you're supposed to. And that's typically what it comes down to.
That's right.
I mean, let's talk about Alabama a year ago. Lost to a couple of 6-6 teams
Yeah.
in the regular season.
Yeah.
If you take care of those type of games, you're probably gonna like more of what your postseason looks like than otherwise. But I think Florida has a team that can navigate those first 5 or 6 at 5-1, 4-2. And again, the problem is you can beat LSU and Miami, but and no one will talk about going to A&M on October the 11th, but that's the week after Texas.
It is.
So the one thing you can't afford is if you do fall to Texas in Gainesville, which I'm not certain that's going to happen. But if you do, you can't let Texas beat you the next week at A&M too, because A&M is going to be tough enough on its own.
They are.
That if you don't, that's where I think the test of Napier really shows up, is week in and week out. And I did think that was the case last year for Florida. I will say that. Injuries and some other things, the defensive side being a mess. It wasn't good, but I didn't ever look at Florida really last year, even in getting just shellacked in Austin. That was, you didn't have a quarterback.
Right.
But I didn't watch that and go, you know what, this team just didn't even show up or put forth the effort. I think sometimes they were just massively, they were more than anything.
Now you mentioned A&M. See, Mike Elko really was furious at his team at the end of last year.
Yeah.
I mean, on some of the booster tours, he said, "Look, we can stop anybody." No. So I mean, he is.
And that's a defensive guy.
It really is.
Like Elko.
Yeah. So
that's not Steve Spurrier or an offensive guy saying, "Well, if we could just," or Lane. Talking about the defense in those terms. That's so it takes it to heart, right?
Oh yeah, no question about that. So it's gonna be a fascinating year in Gainesville, without a doubt.
It surely will be, Brent. And Brent, let's cover anything else you might want to hit on here before we get out of here on a Tuesday night.
The only thing I want to mention real quick, and we won't have to go into a lot of names because I know a lot of our listeners probably don't know that. But are you amazed at how I am? I tell you one thing: the big dogs still can recruit, can't they, Trav? Yeah. I mean, what Bama's done and Georgia's done, and I give Florida credit for this too. The man alive, the SEC has flexed a few times, and they've gotten some of those teams have gotten just about everybody they want over the last few days.
Yeah, you got breakers, and then you got finishers, closers.
Yes.
And SC the last few years under Lincoln Riley's been a breaker. They break out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think SC right now, based on the rankings, is still the number one class. But you are starting to see some of the bigger dogs walk late, as we've heard it referred to in the past. So Alabama on a run, Georgia, you expect it, So it's good to be king. And I know the Big Ten's won the last couple of national titles, but if we stretch that out over the last 20 years or so, I think still feel comfortable with Alabama in that spot. And so we'll see how it goes from a recruiting perspective. It's fascinating to consider in future years how recruiting might play into revenue sharing.
Absolutely.
Guys getting committed, or when does that start in terms of they can
right.
If we have a signing day and a kid signs, does that make them binding to the university to the point where they're now eligible for revenue sharing?
As a
signee? I mean, I don't know.
Now think about this a minute real quick. They are considering moving signing day. I understand for guys who have put all this together or who have looked at it, that early December and the first Wednesday of February is really not going to work as far as how the payment schedules are going to go. So what they're looking at is July, August, September. And my point is, Trav, imagine what we've seen in recruiting after all these official visits.
Yeah.
What would it have been like if signing day had been today?
Oh, jeez. Crazy. Yeah. And what happens when, guys need an advance on their revenue
Yeah.
sharing? Because that would have been me back
Yeah.
in college.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coach,
Oh,
I
yeah.
know our check doesn't drop. It drops
Yeah.
on the 15th and the
Yeah.
1st, or 1st and the 15th, but
Mhm.
a little short, you know, be trying to
Yeah.
get advances
Yes.
and things like that. No, it's unprecedented.
It is.
I was asked about that on a radio program earlier today. What do you expect to happen today? I go, I have no idea.
No,
I'm like
absolutely
everyone
not.
else, kind of waiting to see. But
Yeah.
more and more of these athletic programs having to get their ducks really in a row to sort
Mhm.
of navigate this as best they can and adapt and adjust
Absolutely.
where needed. That's the only way I can see to sort of work through this. Well, Brent, as always, a lot of fun here on Second Helping. For those of you out there, if you haven't subscribed to the Reier on YouTube channel, hope you'll go ahead and do that. Hit a thumbs up for us, a like. That would help Brent and myself out tremendously as well. Anything else, Brent, before we get out of here?
One last thing, I'll give folks an update with the magazines. Pretty much
Oh,
everything is out.
yes.
I need a magnifying glass, but Phil Steele is out now. And we've got Lindy's, Phil Steele, and Athlon. All of those are out before the 4th of July.
There you go, man. Some light reading for the upcoming. You got
Absolutely.
a 3-day weekend coming up to really pour over those
Yes.
those publications, and as we talked about, going to be right into SEC Media Days. So buckle up, folks. We'll have a lot of fun SEC talk right here for you on the channel. So check us out when you can. For Brent Beaird, I'm Travis Reier. Thank you again for joining us right here on Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the #1 league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. Until next time, so long, everybody.